morning all, this is Christine here from Secret Garden Mercantile and Country Brocante, and I'm going to be showing you how to do a resin pour and make gingerbread out of resin using the ginger and spice mold from IOD. We do have, these are limited edition, but we have some left at our shop, so you can get them online or visiting us. The first thing that I'm going to be doing here is getting ready to pour the resin, and this is quick cast resin. It's a white resin from Alumilite, and you can get it at Michael's, or I think Amazon has it available. They have it in 8-ounce jar or 8-ounce bottles. I usually get the larger ones because I use so much resin in the molds that I pour. But you can buy it in smaller amounts, and it's wonderful stuff because it sets up really quickly. Now I'm going to be pouring the resin, and I use a little beaker that's 100 mLs, and I'm going to be pouring 50 mLs of the part A, and then I'll be using 50 mLs of part B. So there's 2 bottles of resin, and they don't activate until you put them together. Always wear gloves. I use the nitrile gloves for pouring resin because people have been known to develop some allergies from resin. It can be can cause your skin, to have problems. So that was the 50 mLs of the hardener that I just added, which is part B. And then I'm going to, there's the whole mix, and it turns kind of yellowish, a yellowish cast, until we start mixing it. And I'm going to speed this mixing up because it takes a few minutes, and you want to make sure to do it very, very completely. You don't want any unmixed resin on the sides. You want to keep mixing and mixing until it's completely blended together perfectly. And I always scrape the sides of the beaker as well to make sure that I've got everything mixed well. So I'm mixing away there, and then what'll happen is it first turns white and then clear again, and then it'll start warming up, and then you'll realize, oh, it's time to pour. And you don't want to wait too long because it is quick set resin, so you don't want it setting up before you even get it poured into your molds. So now we're going to actually pour it into the little girl gingerbread. And I'm pouring it out right nicely, carefully, so that I keep it within the mold. The molds have little edges that IOD put on them, little rims, so that you don't over pour as easily, which is a wonderful little invention that they came up with specifically for their molds. And I push it in a little bit just to make sure that everything's covered well with my little popsicle stick. I'm pouring the little boy mold now, and again, I'm making sure not to over pour. You want it to be a nice flat surface also when you're pouring molds, because then when you pop them out, if you want to adhere the mold to another surface like a board or some furniture or whatever you want to do with it, you'll have a nice flat surface to glue on. So now I'm going to work on pouring the little dog, and it's got a lot of detail. It's got a very fine little tail, which I just poured into, and it allowed me to, because I'm at kind of close to the end of my beaker actually. It's easier to pour when you have less in the beaker actually, so better control over your pour. Again, I'm poking it into the little fine details, the ears, and making sure that it's completely in the tail area. You always want to look carefully at your molds to make sure that they're completely filled. I've got a little left over, so now I'm pouring the little candy piece, and I think it's a little piece of taffy maybe that is on the mold. These are delightful little additions, so I'm pouring those as well. And I can use those either for my little gingerbread people or for another project, as the case may be at Christmas. So now we're going to be actually waiting patiently for the resin to start setting up. I'm pouring a little bit more into the girl mold. I think I realized it was a little maybe too thin. You want to look carefully, like I said, at all the details on your molds to make sure, because I've sometimes poured and then realized, oop, I didn't get a spot. Now, as you see, I've got this in high speed, but the resin is setting up in the mold, and that's just what it should be doing. It'll turn white when it actually hardens, so it's doing that now, and it takes a total of about 10 minutes, even though this is in high speed that I've got here on the video. So, and as you can see, like for example, the little dog's tail is not quite showing up white right now. So you want to wait until everything is getting solid and has turned completely white. So that's a really important part of this. I'm touching it now just to see if it feels like it's getting to the point where it can be demolded. I'm testing it with this little candy. Look at that. The level of detail is amazing on these. And that popped out just fine, although it's a small piece. And I'm checking to make sure there's nothing sticky. I took off my gloves. You might not want to do that quite so quickly, but I just like to feel things with my hands, so I risked it a little bit. But I'm checking the mold again to see, and it's probably kind of warm still. It will be warm when it's setting up, and that's perfectly normal for the mold. Here I am taking it out, and look at the detail on that. He's got his little cable knit sweater. His little face is totally detailed, and they're just wonderful, these molds. Checking the little girl to make sure that she's solid, and I'm just pulling that out. At first they're somewhat pliable, as you can see, so I'm just poking it back in place so that it's going to be flat. Eventually they'll dry quite hard, and they're very durable. So they're wonderful to use for ornaments or even as standalone, which you'll see is what I'm doing with them in my vignette that I have in my little shop vignette, my display. There I'm taking a little bit of excess that went over on this little dog, and I'm just plucking it off with my fingers. If you have excess, if you over pour by accident, don't worry. Once it's set up, you can actually tear it away because of that lip that IOD put in place on these molds. It's very easy to tear them away from, once you take them out, so not a problem. Now what I'm doing is getting ready to paint, and I'm using my color wheel to try to mix a color of paint that would look like a gingerbread color. And I have various colors, but I don't have one that I quite think looks like gingerbread. So I'm putting together with my Amy Howard at Home one-step paint. I'm using this color, which is called Peachy Keen. It's an orange, which I saw if I mix it with black on my color wheel, it should come up with sort of a gingerbread looking color. I like my gingerbread color to be a little darker, excuse me, a little darker than some, because I have made gingerbread at home many times, and I like it to look authentic. So I'm mixing the Peachy Keen orange color, and I'm mixing in some black. It's actually the Amy Howard one-step paint in black, and I'm just squirting a little bit from my bottle in here. I always decant my cans into bottles to make things easier for me in my shop, in my studio. So there it goes. I kind of like that first color. I kept adding some black to it, and it got kind of grungy looking. And eventually I decided that it would be a good idea to add a little bit of red. So I'm using this Charm School, which is a beautiful red color from Amy Howard. I thought maybe it would give it a little more gingery hue to it. And I'm just trying that carefully because that's not what my color wheel recommended, but I just have a feeling that red could help this a little bit. And as I'm doing it a little more, I said, oh yes, it's looking pretty good. It's getting more gingery looking, and then I decided darkening it up a little bit would be a good idea too. Like I said, I'm kind of trying for an authentic gingerbread look. I don't know, some people do more of a caramely color, but I like it to be a little darker because gingerbread dough is actually kind of dark. So at least in my experience, that's what I've done. So. So I think it's from the molasses that I've added in the past to it, so maybe that's where I get the darkness. But so here we go. Now I'm checking the color a little bit on my paper just to see how it looks. And it's looking pretty good as far as I'm concerned. It's kind of a gingerbread color. And then I decided it would be a good idea to try it, see what it looked like when it was dry as well. So here I'm actually using the hair dryer to dry the paint quickly so that I can get an idea before I actually paint my pieces of what the end result is going to look like. As you can see, it darkens up a little bit when it does dry, so I think it looks pretty authentic though, so I thought I'd try that color and see how it goes. That's it. Okay, so here are my little molds. There's the gingerbread lady and the gingerbread gentleman, and also the little boy and the little girl. And I'm going to always go ahead and make sure I paint the back. You know, I think the funny thing is that I always get frustrated with painting the back of anything. And I tend to always, if I leave it to the end, I don't feel the thrill of going back and painting the back later. So I always try to discipline myself to go ahead and paint my backs of anything that I make in advance. So I made sure on this project to go ahead and paint the backs of those gingerbread people because I don't want to leave them white. And so I thought that was important to do. And I'm just using a little chip brush here, and I'm just spreading the paint really nicely onto the resin. The Amy Howard at Home one-step paint sticks really well to the resin, and as it cures, it'll stick even better. I find that if I paint the resin soon after I actually take it out of the molds, that helps the paint to adhere to. So if you want your resin to really stay painted nicely, then it's a good idea to do it relatively quickly. Here I'm painting the little girl, little pieces. Of course, I get paint all over my fingers, but this paint is a really lovely product. It's low in VOCs. It doesn't have a lot of toxicity, and you can certainly just wash it off. I do tend to scrub my hands quite a bit at the end of a big paint project, but I don't mind. I like to actually be involved with everything that I'm painting, so and I tend to get it kind of on myself. I usually use craft paper on my workspace, as you can tell, and I put a few layers down on my table. I have a beautiful pine work table that I use in my classroom here at Secret Garden Mercantile, and so I cover it up in the area that I'm going to be painting with some large craft paper sheets, and I usually use 2 or 3 at a time to make sure that nothing goes through. And the nice thing about that is once I've soiled everything with my paints, with my resins, with everything, then I can just roll them up and actually discard those pieces and start fresh. You know, but I can also use them several times, so I'm not wasting paper any, you know, more than I need to as well. So there we go. We've got the backs painted, and now I'm going to just take my hair dryer again and dry the little gingerbread people because I'm always impatient. I want to get everything done as quickly as possible. So I'm using my hair dryer to dry them off. And as you can tell from the color of the paint, it's changing pretty rapidly. It's a nice matte finish, which is ideal for the project that we're doing. And it dries very quickly. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the front, but you need to make sure to get into all those details. You can see there's just so much texture on these, and so you want to make sure that you don't leave any white spots or anything that aren't painted. So it's important. Again, I'm using the little chip brush, and it gets into all the little divots and all the details of their sweaters, and they have little beaded cuffs on their dresses, and you know, they're just delightful little figures. But you want to make sure to get into all the nooks and crannies as you're painting them. Oh, and of course our little dog, we got I think it's a Schnauzer or a Westie maybe, I'm not sure, but anyway, he's lovely, and he has his own little cable knit sweater. again, I'm going to go ahead and dry these with the hair dryer just to speed along the process, because I really am excited about seeing the final result with these. That's what I'm really excited about. Going ahead and putting a second coat on the back, and just to make sure it's all covered nicely. Sometimes you get on the resin, you can get some little white streaks that are left over, especially from the bristles of the brush, you know, not coating it completely evenly. So and then I'm putting a second coat also on the front. I think I must have dried the back again in between, but we're getting them all covered up and all colored so that they can be ready for the next step, which is going to be adding the frosting and the sugar to them. And I call it that because it's not real, of course, but we're trying to simulate kind of a gingerbread look. Okay, so here they are. Now I'm using a little Posca white acrylic paint pen to accentuate all of their little details. Their mouths, their eyebrows even, little trim that they have, their beaded trim, all the cute little scallops on the skirt. And I sped this up because this did take quite a bit of time doing all these little details, but it's really fun time and creative time as well. And the little Posca pens work really well for these types of details on figures, so they're nice to have. I have a variety of colors on hand also to do outlining and that kind of thing if I want to on other projects, and they work really well for all those types of things. This little girl has polka dots on her dress, so I'm making sure to accentuate those as well. And her little bow around her hair, and then on to our little boy, and he has his little buttons and lots of little details as well. And our little dog, I accentuated his eye too. So, and then I'm going to use, this is called Stoneware. It's a color again of the Amy Howard at home, the one-step paint that we do sell here at Secret Garden Mercantile and Country Brocante. And I'm going to do a little wash with this. Now I accidentally didn't film the original wash that I did, but here's the idea of it. You just use a little water and paint on your brush, and then cover it up, and then what you do is use a wet wipe to just rub it back, okay? So, and you can offload your brush before you do it, the wash, if you'd like, onto your paper as well. But here you can see now we've got really nice looking gingerbread, and they look like they've been, you know, got a little bit of coating of sugar on them, and they're just delightful. And there's the whole family.